Welcome to the Win All Day Every Day podcast presented by Prairie Hockey Academy. My name is Barret Kropf. I'm the general manager for the Prairie Hockey Academy and head coach for the U15 prep team that competes in the CSSHL, the Canadian Sports School Hockey League. I'm joined today, it's our 9th episode of our series, joined today by our co-host, Justin Simpkins. Justin, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Barret. 9 episodes in, right?
Unbelievable.
I'm glad we just said yes and got going. That's great.
And when I think back after, 9 weeks, we've had some tremendous guests. Like we've had Melissa Arachi, we've had Scott King, Bob Lowe's. Speaking of Bob Lowe's, in a couple of weeks, he's going to have the Stanley Cup in Regina.
Right.
October 7th weekend, going to take it to the Rider game, raising a bunch of money for the Cancer Foundation there in Regina, get your picture with the cup. So we had him on talking about culture. Like I said, Melissa was here talking about nutrition. Adrian Vlaka talking about working out.
Yeah.
A pile of coaches have come on. Like, honestly, it's been a rock star lineup for 8 weeks.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, right? I mean, we've highlighted some SJHL teams, a couple top clubs in the SJ. It's been really neat. The Calvert brothers, I think Atlee Calvert's actually at the Pittsburgh Penguins camp right now.
Yeah.
Rowan's up with the Saskatoon Blades, and so wishing Atlee best of luck. But it's been fun. It's been a really fun first 8 episodes, and happy to be here for the 9th. And I know we've got some great guests already lined up for the next number of weeks to come.
Yeah, and we want to give people a bit of a snapshot on. People are asking what was the reason for the podcast? Why'd you start it? Do you think you're hoity-toity that you guys think you got this podcast rolling now? And it's like
spare time.
We want to tell the story of Prairie Hockey Academy. I think that's probably the number one genesis part of it. But also we get a ton of parents and players and grandparents and friends asking just about hockey advice, right? So we're trying to pull in a wide range, whether it's, JP Narbin talking about culture and having him come in to talk about all things culture, whether it's, Scott King talking about skill development, or like we said, Adrian talking about, he's training the best hockey players on the planet. I think we could probably learn from him a little bit, right?
Yeah,
so
right. We've
been able to provide a lot of advice, and today we just want to unpack some of our Prairie Hockey Academy advice, and I think that starts with you're the genesis story for the academy, and I think there's lots of people that are out there that are curious. They see this really cool team with these amazing jerseys and this brilliant color scheme, and they're from a small town somewhere in Saskatchewan. They don't really know where.
Yeah.
And in 7 short years, Prairie Hockey Academy, we're getting going this week. We've got 4 teams, 80 athletes, student athletes, over 100 players, alumni have went to junior camps, or close to 100 players this year have been to junior camps in 7 short years. Like those are some remarkable things, and people are like, well, it's still a bit of a secret. So yeah. I just want to unpack that with you. I want you to kind of give us a bit of the genesis story of, what's your hockey background? What brought about the change in your hockey journey that would say, man, I've got a ton of time. Why don't I start a hockey academy?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I guess I'd say, Barret, that it started for the start of it. I mean, why I began, Prairie Hockey Academy is because I think kids matter. And I think that transformational coaching in the world of hockey was a really important thing for me, and something that I was passionate about. And I wanted to feel like, how do we create a space and an environment where kids can come and know that they're loved, first off, that they're loved and cared for who they are or who they were, and not for what they did. We see so many, I had friends in the hockey world that I've lost due to them just losing their identity in the game of hockey and not knowing who they were. And, some of those are real tragic stories, right? And we can talk about that stuff another day on another podcast, but it affected me greatly. And I just saw this opportunity that how do we develop young men that know to their core who they are, who they were created to be, and that hockey's a game they get to play, but they've got, something incredibly special to play in this world, right? A part to play in the world, right? And so it kind of started out of that. Now, I mean, it started a long time before that. He asked about my hockey career. It wasn't. I'm not going to be asked to be on a podcast talk about my playing career or my draft status or anything. But the fact of the matter is that I sometimes say this a little tongue in cheek and joke around a bit, but the truth is I was a bit of a mediocre hockey player with a bad attitude. I probably thought I was a lot better than I was, and that doesn't get you very far. And the junior hockey landscape can kind of chew you up and spit you out pretty quick if you have a bad attitude, actually. And we've heard lots of our guests talk about body language and things like that being so important to them as coaches in the junior hockey world. And I, had an opportunity to go down to play some Division III hockey in the state of Minnesota. And when I was down there, I just happened to run into a man who was the guidance counselor of the university. And his name is Jay Thorson. And Jay just bumped into me one day in the hallway because I was wearing a Hockey Canada toque, and recognized that I must have been one of the hockey players, and just struck up a conversation and took an interest in my life, and I'd say began to mentor me. And I had an incredible semester there. And I don't know, God just did some really unique things in my heart at that point in time, I'd say. And I came back here to Canada, and I ended up finishing up some college hockey at Barret College. And over my time there, I started to really get into leadership, and I just loved reading leadership books and learning about different pieces. And when I graduated, decided to start a hockey program. Just thought, I had majored in marketing. I was told that if I called it AAA, that people would come, right? That was kind of a marketing principle maybe. And so we created, a spring AAA hockey program, but it wasn't about hockey. We created it because we had found all these leadership principles that I felt were true, that I wish that somebody would have given to me at the age of 12. I think it would have changed the trajectory in my life. And so we decided to run a spring hockey program. On Saturdays, we'd practice. In between practice, we would go to the classroom and we'd do leadership training. And the foundation of it all was just to teach kids a simple principle for me, that the simple definition of a leader is someone who takes responsibility. And I think where my heart really got pulled into this whole thing was this first group of young men. They were born in 1998 and 1999. I had a young brother. He was a 98 birth year, so I decided to start there to have the opportunity to coach him. And we had these, roughly 38 or 40 young athletes in a room, and I just surveyed the room. I said, hey, tell me about, in this room today, how many of you are leaders? And 5 or 6 put their hands up, a real small percentage. It wasn't even the 80-20 rule, really. And it just dawned on me that, maybe because their U11 coach or their Adam hockey coach at that time gave them an assistant captain on their jersey, that's what made them think they were leaders. And so we just began to invest in these kids and just teach them simple leadership principles, what it means to take responsibility, what it means to do productive things, what it means to make tough decisions in life, what it means to, give somebody else the credit and serve your teammates and make them better. And just, you have the opportunity by taking responsibility to be a leader anywhere you are, in your classroom, at home, with, the dishes, taking the garbage out, something you've been asked to do, and just start to invest in them. And young kids are sponges. Like they, I think that, I have a 3-year-old son right now. He wants to be a superhero. He thinks he's a superhero, right? And I think we all do when we were young, and something happens to us and all of a sudden we don't think we're a leader anymore or have that, potential inside of us. And so it was about kind of instilling that, I guess, in them again. And it just really stuck. And it was fascinating to me how it stuck, and to hear about kids making better decisions at school and taking responsibility and stepping up and leading and doing things on the playground, in the classroom, and in the meal, in the lunch hall, and things like that. And we'd get emails from parents that would forward us an email from a teacher saying, I don't know what your son did this summer, this spring, or in April, but he's really changed here in the month of May. And the parents would send us that and say, we really think it's some of the principles you're teaching him. And so we just thought this was really cool. Mm-hmm. It took off. We ended up running, half a dozen teams spring, and just had a lot of fun just teaching these principles. And around the year of 2016, I just really felt something was birthed in my heart to chase down an opportunity like this. I had no idea what a Hockey Canada accredited school was at that point in time. And, Briarcrest Christian Academy was CHS at the time, approached us to say, would you guys help us get a Cougar hockey program up and running again? And so some of our listeners don't know what Cougar hockey is, but years ago, the high school in Caronport had a Cougar hockey program. And Barret, you played a big part in Cougar hockey history, and others did, like Royden Taylor and even Lloyd Friesen and Jim McGee. And I'm sure we could list another 30 names here, right. Ryan Smith and others, right? And so that was, this opportunity came, and we started to look into it and found out that, in order to run a program again, it had to be run as a Hockey Canada accredited school. And we did a bit of, it took a year and did some research and did an application, and eventually were approved through Hockey Saskatchewan and Hockey Canada to run Hockey Canada accredited school in Caronport, and that was the start of Prairie Hockey Academy. We were approved to operate in September of 2017, and a lot of people told us we couldn't do it. We couldn't get people to come to Caronport to play hockey. I moved there, and by golly, they were almost right. The first year almost killed me. It was incredibly hard to get off the ground, to share a vision when we weren't yet in a league and we were independent, and we were in Caronport in the middle of nowhere in a lot of ways. And so, but here we are, going the start of year 7 with 4 teams, I think, very competitive teams, 80 student athletes, and a whole number of young men that have graduated from us and doing some really cool things with their life. And it's been a really exciting ride so far, and yet there's a long way to go to achieve a vision that we have for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I get the sense that it's really just the beginning, right? Like sometimes it takes a real long time to get some of those roots deep into the soil. And from what, I'm 13 months into it with my boots on the ground planted, on this side of the Caronport hockey journey in its current format as PHA. And like you said, from 98 until the mid 2000s being involved on the Cougar side of it, when it was just a AA hockey team that competed in the South Sask Hockey League, and you still had to beg, kids from Shaunavon and Flin Flon and points in between to come and play for you. It's no different than...
So grateful we had all those kids from Shaunavon, though. I mean, they turned out okay.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Pretty good musicians. I think
that's right.
People might know them as the Hunter brothers, but pretty much all the Hunter boys, they all came through. They're Cougar hockey alumni, are part of our history as well, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
As we talk about, the growth of PHA, it's in its 7th year. Last on Tuesday we had these 80 families drop off their boys last Tuesday and get registered. And, what an exciting time, you as one of the founding members to be able to come in and see these families and the excitement, the nervous energy of, dropping your kid off and leaving them in the dorm or with the billet family. Like there's got to be some buttons broken on your shirts because of the pride that you've got in what's going on right now.
Yeah, it was a really cool day, right? And I think my highlight was even, compared to year 1, right? To show people, families could come in with their son, and they would come down the hallway and walk into the Champions Hall, right? Our expansion, our dressing rooms, and just moms were asking me, is it okay if I go into the room and take a picture with my son in front of his stall? And I'm like, well, if he'll let you. I mean, but yeah, absolutely. I thought that was really neat just to see the buzz there.
Yeah.
It was a special day.
Yeah, I mean, just, people out there that are listeners, it might be hard to imagine, but we start off early. We ask our returning players to come early so that they can sort of be the welcoming committee for all the new incoming players. And it's, it's almost half and half to have a large contingent of returning players is, testament to what's going on. They want to be back involved with it. But then to see all the young families come and drop their boys off and see our locker room, I mean, we're on a regular basis now. We're getting agents and general managers of junior teams and whatnot come by and stop in, and they're like, we hear you guys have a pretty good locker room. Yeah. And they come in and they're blown away because it's a world-class locker room. It's nicer than a lot of junior A and major junior teams. And, parents ask, well, why have you gone through such great lengths to do this? And, it comes back to some of that development, and if you do things with excellence, we're going to talk about excellence here in the show later on, but if your locker room's, a place of excellence, it's a place of refuge, it's a place where you can have a growth mindset and come in and get ready for your practice without trying to figure out where your gear is and pack it up and drag it to the rink. It's right there. You start to build habits for your junior career. So when you go and play junior, you already know how to operate in a world-class locker room, how to work with an equipment manager. All those things we're helping these young men and women to get prepared for the game at the next level.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it's, you're constantly trying to create an environment that's high performance, right? And, and create one where you can help young athletes begin to find themselves as well at the same time. So you're working on their maturity at this age, right? And helping them prepare themselves for that junior level. And like you said, I think having that dressing room, having the equipment manager, it helps that out.
Yeah.
It walks them into that environment earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not just PHA, the 10 months of the school year. You still continue. The PHA still runs the spring teams and has great success there in bringing up the next crop of talent. the Prairie Performance Program is starting to generate some great alumni. And with the exciting part right now is we're starting to get text messages and phone calls from guys that trained with us all summer. They're reporting to their NHL camps with their test results and at their Western League tryouts, and the test results are coming back. These guys are blowing test results out of the water, and dropping their body fat count, and increasing their jumps, their bench press, everything. Like, it's just they're blown away, and they're just saying, when they get in front of the cameras and people are like, man, like you blew everyone away in the testing. What was the difference? Like, well, I spent the summer at Cairnport. People are quickly Googling, like, where the heck is Cairnport? What's this guy doing to get
That's
better?
Right. Yeah. I thought that was funny when I heard that, Cairnport. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, right? And I think that, goes to just the Can West Center and at the High Performance Training Center, we call it. And then with Dustin, like our director of performance, who we'll have here on the guest to talk a little bit more about how he views S&C or strength and conditioning, and just, it's all about, that injury prevention and functional movement, right? And so did so much work this summer with a lot of those pro guys on just their individual leg strength, and you're seeing it. 2 guys reported 4-inch vertical increases at camp this year,
right?
Like 4 inches.
Yeah.
And shuttle run. One guy was blew away the class at the shuttle run. Another guy in the assault bike was top in the whole camp. And I just think it's really cool to see those stats coming in, and those guys put the work in.
Right.
No doubt about it. It was a good group. I think they were easy to work with because they came every day with a great attitude. But Cairnport, yeah, so
It's happening.
it's neat.
Yeah, we're 10 days into the academy season. Games are happening. First exhibition game tomorrow with the 17s, the U17s with Trey's squad.
Yeah.
The 15s got 3 games the next 4 days, and then we get into some real bullets, obviously, with our opening showcase in Victoria at the end of the month. It's a real exciting time. Like the culture right now across the board with all 4 teams is incredibly dynamic. Great leaders, great athletes, great students. Everyone's buzzing, and it's really a fun place to be right now.
Yeah. Which is awesome to hear. I mean, if someone was going to quit, they should have quit on the weekend, right? When you were put with the retreat that you guys did, and just some of the, I guess the physical challenges and, the shared suffering, if you would, that they experienced together. And it just sounded like it was a really galvanizing event that you put on.
Yeah. I mean, our goal for the weekend, it was a 48-hour sport marathon. So when you tell a group, 60 athletes that were involved in it, that we're going to do sports for the next 48 hours, like, they're just jumping out of their skin. They're so excited.
Right.
But then we sort of, all of a sudden, you're going to be drinking from a fire hose, because it's going to be, the theme was to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So it wasn't just sort of like tiddlywinks. Like, we were playing high-end sports. We asked them to be as competitive as they could. We divided them up into 4 teams. We tried to crush them physically and mentally, because we want to get them to the point where they're not motivated by their externals. We want to help them find that focal point so that they can have a growth mindset. And in that process, they're gonna find a way to be a life champion by pursuing that edge of excellence with everything that they do. Right. Our mission at Prairie Hockey Academy is to win all day, every day, not just win all day when we feel like it, or win all day when we're playing against a weak team, or win all day when the conditions and the refs and everything else go our way. You're going to have all these externals that are coming in and crush you. You're going to have a 4-game weekend where every game's in the morning, and you're going to have a sleepless night, and you're going to be worried about the agents and scouts and everything else. How do you block that out? Right. So that's why we did the retreat with this 48-hour sport marathon, to exhaust them physically, to challenge them mentally, and to help them find that focal point, so that when chaos hits, and it will hit, they have to find a way to get to that focal point quickly, and park their mistakes and move on so they can continue performing. And so it was a lot of fun seeing 14, 15, 16-year-old boys really wrestle with that, and jumping across creeks and climbing, bridges and jumping off sand pits and playing ultimate frisbee and soccer and tug of wars and paintball and just you name it, we did.
Like, there's some highlights, right? Like paintball and like tug of war and ultimate frisbee. But then there's a 6 a.m. 5K run with a 25-pound plate, right? And
just all kinds of challenges.
I thought, didn't you end the weekend with hill sprints?
Yeah,
it looked like. And did I hear somebody ran 45
45 hill sprints and helped his team go from last to first in the standings. It was unbelievable.
In 30 minutes?
45 minutes.
45 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow.
A hill a minute, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Impressive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Really impressive. And that, really neat. What a cool weekend. Sleeping in tents.
Yeah.
Right. So all the guys, it's,
Yeah.
Having a night with tents is okay.
Yeah.
There's some s'mores around a campfire, but I don't really take it that's what happened here.
No, by the time it was dark out and the sun set early, they were exhausted. Their shoes were soaking wet from crawling through the creek and under picnic tables and over rocks and it got pretty cool. And the coyotes were howling at the railroad tracks. So there was some nervous boys sleeping, thinking they were coming into the tent. So,
okay,
yeah.
That's
Lots of fun was had, and even now talking to them today and yesterday, and just asking them how they are, and we're not reckless. We're not trying to get them hurt, of course. We got the whole season ahead of us, so we really made sure we're taking care of that. But they loved it, and now we've got this reference point all season, and asking them, remember the retreat? What was your focal point there? We're going to be going to Victoria next week. Getting up at 3 a.m., going to Regina, flying to Victoria. Maybe it's the first time several of our guys have ever been on an airplane, right?
Mm-hmm.
Playing 4 games, 4 nights in front of 100 scouts. They're in their bantam draft year, all kinds of pressure, and they're going to be stressed out. And so we can easily say, hey, remember 3 weeks ago at the retreat, you had a focal point that helped you get in the zone, and your team won because of that. And so let's get back to that focal point. Yeah.
And that's a lesson that'll, serve them for years. It's that focal point, getting in that zone. It's something that, we see some of the best pros in the world do that, right? And you can see when they have those performances in big games, that you can see that they've mastered that focal point piece. Now, they're not always there. They're not always able to, it's not 100% of the time. Everybody has an off game.
Yeah.
I'm a Russell Wilson Denver Broncos fan, for crying out loud. But it's, it's people have off games, but getting back in that focal point and being, able to find that groove again is what sets people apart, right?
Yeah.
And teams.
Yeah. And we were talking about this earlier, just that whole concept of, being in your comfort zone, being in your growth zone, kind of getting outside of that space of being comfortable a little bit, and then getting out in that panic zone, right? There's lots of different books that talk about this sort of, this growth mindset, this focal point area of life. But, this weekend on Monday night, the whole sporting world got a perfect example about this focal point we're talking about with Mr. Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, what a turn of events, right? But, to go from the highs of it, being the 9/11 and Aaron coming out, and the experience of that, just watching it, I can't imagine being alive. And then 4 plays in. Yeah.
It's Achilles snaps and you got young Wilson on the sidelines being like, okay, I better get in the zone.
Right. Yeah. Wilson's one thing. The entire team, right? Like Wilson had to go do his job, but I'm thinking like your entire roster as a coach, even, like what are you going as a coach going, well, my whole playbook today is for Rodgers, not Wilson.
Yeah.
And it's just
fascinating.
It was
how quickly, everyone was really relying on, everyone is in their comfort zone, really, right? On the Jets with having Aaron Rodgers, the Hall of Fame guy, sitting there, on the snap. And then all of a sudden, now everyone's pushed out of that, and now they're like, okay, how are we going to change? And so all the coaches had to change. They're in that bit of that growth space. They had to make some adjustments on the fly. Players had to step up defensively. The one dude, 3 interceptions.
Yeah.
There had to be, even from Buffalo's side, they had to be thinking, man, how do we get in that zone? Like they're dialed in. What are we going to do to get back into it?
Well, that was just it. In a way, it's almost like, it seemed to me like the Jets responded better to the injury than the Bills did.
Right.
Yeah. It's almost like the Bills got caught watching, like, this is crazy. This just happened. And Josh Allen was constantly panicking.
Right.
And
didn't
throwing air balls, right? At times. And then to see, was it Gibson? Was that his name? Xavier Gibson?
Yeah.
Just to, as a walk-on, undrafted guy to come in and
walk off.
It was a what a story. And at the same time, it's hard to say what a cool story because, you didn't want to see Rodgers injured or anybody in that scenario, but so I'm sure we'll be talking about it for a long time.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I just think it's a teaching point. Like you said, we don't want to see people get injured to learn things in life, but sometimes that's what it takes. You got to get in the zone. I think if you look back over the history, I'm sure somewhere someone's keeping a logbook of, and it's probably the odds makers that are keeping this book of. anytime someone faces adversity, their next performance, they're probably going to be in the zone, right? If they've managed to find a focal point and move from that comfort to growth to managing a bit of panic and coming out of it with poise.
Right.
How many guys have been successful and girls, like in their sporting environment, in their business environment?
Sure. Yeah.
When the crush of the world is on you, how are you handling it? Have you managed this well? Have you prepared for it? Are you got the tools in your toolbox to get into the zone and find your focal point?
Yeah. And I think this happens in different ways, right? There's books written about it, right? Whether it's the Chicago Bulls where they lost Utah Jazz, right? They lose to the Jazz and they're like, we're going to lose this team. We got like one more shot at it. Let's go do it, right? Or the Oilers in the 80s and the dynasty losing to the Islanders and then all of a sudden, figuring it out. And I think we could probably list another half a dozen like that. And that's really unique and probably, pertains a little bit to what you're teaching the young man in the retreat and just as a team, how do you come together in these events? But, individually too, that tragedy happens in our lives. Mm-hmm. And as an individual, right. And I think you were telling me a little bit about Jumbo, right, in the cycling world. Yeah. And I mean, maybe that's probably a great story here just to talk about, how does this young man choose to basically put everything he has into that moment. Right. And when probably it would have been easier just to
mail it in, hop off the bike.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right now, one of the 3 grand tours is on. You got the Tour of Italy, you got the Tour of France that everyone, if you ask them about cycling, like, is that Tour de France? Like, yeah, that's the big one.
Yeah.
But then the other one right now is the Tour of Spain. They're all 3-week, 21 stages, about 2,500 kilometers, 200 kilometers a day, 50 kilometers an hour, 10,000 feet of climbing up all these mountains and sprinting downhill and guys crashing and just, it's incredibly intense to watch the sport of cycling. I think we've talked about it in a podcast before. Like there's the Unchained podcast or the YouTube series that sort of emulates the F1 version of it. And if people watch it, they're going to be hooked on cycling.
Right.
But the Jumbo-Visma team has won the last 2 Grand Tours, the Tour of Italy and the Tour de France. And they're poised this weekend they're in the lead. They got first, second, and third right now in the current standings with 3 stages left. But yesterday morning, they're at the start line for stage 16, and it's a mountain climb. It's a 158 kilometer stage that finishes with 2 uncategorized climbs, meaning like they're so steep. They're 15% grades to climb them up for 10 kilometers. And they're at the start line, and one of the leaders from the Tour de France, because you have 30 guys on your team, but only 7 can race in a Grand Tour.
Okay.
He had a heart attack that morning and crashed his car in an intersection with his pregnant wife in his car, and he's in a coma. So the team finds out about this 5 minutes before the start of stage 16 at the Tour of Spain, and they're all looking at each other like, "What do we do? He's in an induced coma. Do we just hop off our bikes and go to his bedside, kind of thing? Because that's a team thing to do." And then they made the decision to ride the stage to honor him and to Van Hooydonk would want us to ride today. He'd be mad if we hopped off our bikes. And so Jonas Vingegaard, who had won the Tour de France, he's sitting 3rd overall at this point in the Tour of Spain. A kid from Colorado, Sepp Kuss, is in first place. And 5 kilometers into the race, Vingegaard's like, I'm gone. He not gone as in hopped off his bike, but gone as in he went full throttle and left the rest of the peloton in the dust and won the stage. And he's climbing this last 14% grade, and it's 200 yards to go, and you can see the tears just pouring down his face. And he wins the stage. He points kind of to the skies to kind of say, I did this to honor my best friend who's in a coma right now. And then the cameras are swarming him afterwards because he's grand stage winner. And right away he's like, everyone's like, how did you leave like the entire peloton behind you? Like you legit, it's like you were on a motorbike.
Yeah.
And left them in the dust. And he's just like, I that's the only thing I could do. I was in the zone, and I did all this to honor him. And we see that so many times, like I said, in sports, when individual athletes or groups of business people or groups of athletes in team settings face adversity, if they could get in that zone,
right, yeah,
and find their focal point to be able to perform, nothing can stop them, right? You see baseball players, when a family member dies, a dad dies, they go to the game the next day and they hit 4 home runs and steal 3 bases and
Right.
have the game of their lives, right?
Right.
It's just, to get into that zone requires so much like growth mindset that you're going to overcome all this adversity and use it as an honoring point, right? And I think that's one of the things that really excites me about Prairie Hockey Academy is that's what we're trying to train our guys to do. We're trying to put them in uncomfortable spots, helping them to learn that sometimes it's okay to fail as long as you're failing with purpose and you're using it to grow.
Right.
And that you're finding this focal point in the midst of the chaos of your young life.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we talk about that often, right? That, I mean, like learning is slow and it requires failure. And it requires, feedback, good positive feedback from a coach and how to use that failure. But it's learning. I guess
Right.
that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
It's going to require that failure. And so, but yeah, building that clutch athlete and helping, graduating them from Prairie Hockey Academy with the mindset and understanding that, how to get in the zone, right? What their identity is. And then that next piece of it is like, yeah, failure is going to happen. It's okay. It doesn't make me a bad hockey player or a bad person or anything like that. It just makes me an opportunity to learn, right? And so I think that, yeah, you're right. That's one of the big pieces that we're trying to do here at Prairie Hockey. And I think, as part of it as well, it's just teaching young men that they're powerful, that they're powerful people, that they have a job of connection with their teammates, and that they get to make choices to have success in their life, to make choices that create challenges for them, that they get to make choices, and then they have the power to do that, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
One of the segments that we've tried to, have sort of each week is a bit of a guide and provide segment where we kind of give some advice to parents and players and maybe some coaches or officials that are out there. One of the things that I've really noticed this year, having a bit more of a runway this summer to get to know some of the parents ahead of time and whatnot, is parents make incredible sacrifices for their kids to be able to do stuff, right? Like you see them making, picking up a second job or, rearranging maybe some finances to make that part of it work, but also just, picking up their family and moving them closer so that, they don't have to spend as much money in terms of, putting them up in a dorm or different things like that. And just all kinds of these, every kid's got a different story of how much their parents have made a sacrifice. And, I think that's part of the value in what we're seeing, that the parents value what's going on at PHA so much that they're willing to go through great sacrifice to make this an opportunity for their kids.
Right. Yeah. And it's, which is an incredible honor, right? To know that.
Yeah.
And just that we get to work with these young men every day and that they entrusted them to us.
Right.
And then made a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so it's, at times it feels, I don't want to say heavy, but it's a responsibility too,
Right.
For us to do the best we can each day and to teach them the tools that we promised we're going to give them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the message we've said to parents on this guide and provide section is, I think it was Scott Barney a few weeks ago that said, at the point when they get to junior hockey, it's time to grab a Coke and a popcorn and sit up in the stands.
Right.
But prior to that, when they're still in this real development stage of their lives, it's really just a matter of give them, if your kid is willing to work hard and have some skin in the game, maybe he's, got a summer job to help pay for some of the expenses and maybe some of the gear or whatever it is. But as long as they're willing to give their very best effort and not ever be a quitter, I think that those are some of the things that as parents, as you see that in your kid and you see that fire in their eye, they're willing to go out and shoot 300 pucks at the rink after practice or in the evening when the sun is setting and it's cold out and they're still ripping pucks and, saying no to going to the beach for the weekend with their buddies because they want to stay and train a little bit more. Like those are some signs where you're like, okay, I think my kid's got something here that we need to have a better look at this and give them another opportunity.
Right. That's really neat. I think I'd agree with that. And, a story of a young man that I had the opportunity to train with that went on to have a pretty decent NHL career. He was a Saskatchewan boy. And I just remember his dad, his last year of college, and his dad just told me, if you don't want to get a summer job this year because you want to go try and make pro, you can do that. You can have the truck, you can have the gas. I'll pay for that. I'll pay for all your training. But if there's one morning you don't show up for your training and you sleep in because you're out partying late the night before or anything like that, It's like, I'll be taking away the truck, I'll be taking away the gas card, and you'll be paying for all your own training, right? And and I remember him telling me that story as we were doing some power skating with Leanne Davies in Regina, and I mean, he put in the work that year, and he walked on and made the Florida Panthers that year as a first year out of college, and went on to a pretty storied career. And that was Tanner Glass, and he's a high charactered young man, and but he was able to show that dedication to his mom and dad. And at that point, I mean, he was a college athlete. So it's a little bit older, but he still showed that dedication, and they were happy to provide for him, right? And in that moment where he still needed it,
right?
And so I'd agree. It's a big piece. It's when you start to see the buy-in from your young athlete. It's kind of it's a good opportunity to keep fan that flame.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. As we transition into the final stage of the podcast today, want to dovetail a little bit of that Cougar history we were talking about at the beginning. Guys like Lloyd Friesen and Royden Taylor and Jim McGee and probably John Barkman and a slew of other guys, Eddie Sidebottom and Eddie Coop and so many other great hockey minds and people that have volunteered countless hours. Rod Appleby. What was your sort of experience with some Cougar hockey, at that time, through the 80s, 90s, into the 2000s? What are some things that stand out, from maybe some of those guys like Royden and Lloyd?
Yeah, it's good. I think, I had the opportunity to meet Royden when I was playing college hockey, and just how much he cared. And the man he volunteered and he looked after people. And I think the joke used to always be, even at the tire shop where he was running it, I mean, people couldn't get through the phone line because he was constantly on the phone, recruiting kids or doing different things, right? People's tires probably weren't getting replaced either. But, I think Royden just cared passionately about young men and about seeing them develop on his watch, right?
Mm-hmm.
More than just the hockey side of it. And so there was that. I had the opportunity to meet Jim McGee and skate a little bit in some of his practices. And what I appreciated about Jim was that he understood what it meant to tell the truth with love. Mm. He didn't scream and yell at you or curse at you or anything like that. Jim just, if you weren't good enough or you were too proud or anything like that, he let you know. He told you clearly what you were doing, that you needed to do better. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Jim was, as a high school kid, I mean, Jim was a big, intimidating guy, right? As a coach, he kind of, he had this look in his eyes a little bit. And so he kind of listened to him, right? And I appreciated those guys and what they did. And they built some strong hockey. Cougar hockey was a force every year in the, South Sask AA League. And people knew that. It was at the old Sparrow Gardens. It was a crazy place to play.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
Yeah, my memory, I mean, we moved to Cairnport in 1997 and was able to help out with the college team at that time. And then a few years later came alongside Jim McGee in the year 1999. That summer, Jim came to me. He's like, "Hey, Barret, we're thinking about we'd like to take the guys on a trip, an overseas trip, maybe at Easter time or something. What do you think?" And a friend of mine, Rick Anderson, I said, "Hey, Rick, do you want to come with me on a trip to spy out the land in Kazakhstan? We want to see if that's a good place to take this team." And, we've talked on the podcast a bit about some of the Kazakhstan stories, but that was the 1998 team the 2000 team from Cairnport High School that made their first ever Canadian team to go to the country of Kazakhstan, which was a former Soviet state. 9 years earlier, they were part of the Soviet Union. And for us to go there and play in front of sold-out arenas as this midget AA team from southern Saskatchewan, that we'd won provincials that year, league, and a bunch of other, we had a good year, and rounded up the boys. And at Easter time, we flew into Kazakhstan and drove 1,000 kilometers. Took us 24 hours to drive. The roads were that bad, and we're legit in the middle of nowhere in the city of Ust-Kamenogorsk, and they shut down the city for us. Every place that we went to eat, they had to inspect, and they closed a few restaurants that weren't good enough in quality for us. Like I said, 6,000 people could fit into the arena. I think there was 8 in every game, and they put TVs outside so 1,000 more could watch. They had the military line up at the door and form this chain. And our guys, I mean, they're
teenagers.
They're grade 10, 11, 12 boys, right?
Teenage boys.
So their minds were absolutely blown by this experience. And What excites me is here we are, 23 years later, and we're planning a return trip, and
Yeah.
so many great things came out of that trip. We got to, through the National Hockey League Goals and Dreams program, we got to take 200 sets of player and 20 sets of goalie gear over to Kazakhstan. And I've still got the helmet and the shin pads that I took off a young boy over there. The helmet was a milk crate held together by strips of pop can, or not a milk crate, a milk jug. And his shin pads were volleyball knee pads that had foam glued to the inside and a couple of wood slats. And that's what he was practicing with that. And we took it off and gave him a brand new set of gear that was donated by the NHL Players Union.
Wow.
So of course there's a long history. Like when you look at the history books of Kazakhstan Ice Hockey Federation, they have a whole chapter dedicated to the Karamport Cougars. It's unbelievable,
so cool.
the history that is there.
Yeah.
And so here we are now making plans to head back there this spring and play some games against some teams over there. And I get goosebumps just talking about the opportunity that we're going to have here in a few short months to go back there 24 years later with another Karamport team is really exciting. That's
pretty neat. And it's kind of, where we started this podcast, right? Karamport, Saskatchewan. How about that? And that's a cool hockey story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's, we're coming to the conclusion of the show today. Is there any last words of advice that you want to give? Just sort of, again, we started the podcast talking about your passion, your vision to develop leaders. We're in year 7 of the academy, with lots of great stories being told. Is there anything that you just kind of want to close today's episode with, and just, whether it's a story or just a challenge, another piece of your heart to share with our audience?
Yeah, you know what? I think a quick story. I remember our first game in 2017 as an academy. We actually hosted the Weyburn Red Wings, the U18 AA team, and we were kind of this motley crew of it was a somewhat of a, I think we had 10 14-year-olds on the team and 7 15-year-olds and 1 16-year-old, and we hosted this team, and we ended up beating the Weyburn Red Wings. I think we might have beat them in overtime, and it was a packed crowd at the Barkman Arena. It was a lot of fun. And I just remember we were in the class the next day, and I was leading this leadership class, and we were talking, and I just talked to the team. I said, how did that feel, right? How did it feel to be there and to be able to bring the Cougar hockey back for the first time in, about 9 years at that point in time? And the guys admittedly, it was a lot of fun. Like, it was like, there was like chants in the crowd. It was loud. It was a blast. And it's like, and what kind of responsibility do we have right now, right? As a group of young men, we're learning today about leadership and taking responsibility. And I just remember the one young man who sat in the front row, and he kind of put up his hand, and he just said, it's like, our job is to still remain humble and to be leaders in the hallways here. And I mean, that guy's gone on to, he's going to play in the AHL this year, and he's doing some unique things. And I just remember his answer that day. And I think that's, for me in parting, that I'll always remember that classroom session after that first game and that first win. But I just say, for any young athletes listening today, my heart in that is that they would understand that, simple definition of being a leader is just someone who takes responsibility. So you might not wear a captaincy or assistant captain on your jersey this season, but this doesn't mean that you can't be a leader on the ice, on your line, in the dressing room, on the power play, on the penalty kill, and the role that you're being asked, just taking responsibility of that in your classrooms, at home, different ways. And I just, leaders take responsibility. They make tough decisions based on their purpose, their vision, their values, and I just would encourage people to lean into that this year.
Awesome. Well, this is the end of our 9th episode of the Win All Day Every Day podcast. I am Barret Kropf, General Manager of the Prairie Hockey Academy and head coach for the U15 prep team. And I'm joined here by the director of the academy, Justin Simpkins. And we're thankful that you guys took the time out to listen to the podcast today. In coming weeks, we're going to be revisited by Melissa Arachi. She's going to come in and talk about some nutrition again and kind of get us ready for sort of the start of the season on that front. We've got a couple of our players, our alumni that, they're at Western Hockey League camps, and they're done a really good job. They're going to join us on the podcast, Ethan Peters and Chase Coward. So we're looking forward to that. Just thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch and listen to our podcast. And I look forward to seeing you at episode 10. Have a great night.